I don't know if you heard me earlier, but I was saying you really threw a wrench in my day by having me read this book early. I guess I was going to say it's easy, but that makes it sound simple. But it's a kind of like a page turner, and it's what we talk about all the time.
Oh, thanks.
Uh, from crisis to opportunity, though, what I get, like sometimes I'm reading it and I think this is okay. Like it's going to turn out all right. We have the potential here to actually be better than we were before as a country, as a human race. And then I think, but wait, are we actually going to be able to take advantage of this opportunity? Are you optimistic, given, let's just talk about America, how divided we are, income inequality, that we will be able to seize this opportunity for change here?
I think that's the correct question. And I look, I got to be honest, I'm a glass half empty kind of guy. And I would argue that we probably would have been better off the last 6 or 12 months listening more to the pessimists and less to the optimists. I think our optimism as a nation and our view of exceptionalism has unfortunately morphed into an arrogance that's been a comorbidity. We've had more time to prepare for this. We spend more money on healthcare. We think of ourselves as being innovative. And we sit here today with record hospitalizations and 5% of the world's population and 25% of the infections and deaths. The Chinese word for crisis is risk and also juncture. It tries to combine those two meanings. And I do believe there are huge silver linings coming out of this pandemic, but it's not a default setting. America isn't what it is. It's what we make of it. And I would argue that we will look back on this moment either as having been, what Vonnegut said, that one step in the wrong direction, a step back is a right step, or this could be the signal or the juncture where we really turn down. I think it's up to us. There's some huge silver linings, but a default position that without sacrifice, without leadership, that everything's going to turn out right. So far, I would argue the trajectory here is a negative one.
You actually talk about several different issues, and I was, before we introduced you, talking about one of the things, kind of the self-fulfilling prophecy. When we talk about the weak get stronger, I think this is a portion of the book, or rather the strong get stronger and the weak get weaker. Big tech got stronger, and we use Tesla as the example. We keep talking about how wonderful Tesla is. That reinforces the belief that Tesla is wonderful. People buy the stock, their borrowing costs are lower, and they can keep going forward. Are we setting ourselves up for a big fall?
Well, there's just examples everywhere. It took Apple 42 years to get to $1 trillion, and then it took them 5 months to get to $2 trillion. Tesla, standing here in March, was the fourth most valuable automobile company. Now they're the most valuable and worth more than 2, 3, and 4 at Daimler, Toyota, and Volkswagen combined. And we don't like to say this out loud, but I feel as if this pandemic has largely been invented for taking the top 10% into the top 1% and taking the rest of the 90% downward. There was a study by the Robin Hood Foundation that came out today that said 32% of people in New York have been forced to go to a food bank because of food insecurity since the beginning of the pandemic. So think about this, Adam. You're just as likely in New York State right now, what we think of as the capital or the state that sort of embodies America. You're just as likely to run into someone on the street who's had to go to a food bank than someone who has a college degree. So while we have flipped the script, if you will. Capitalism is meant to be full body contact violence and competition to unleash incredible prosperity such that we can be more empathetic and loving with our brothers and sisters across the nation. And it feels as if our collective efforts right now are to be more empathetic and loving with companies than with people. We figured out a way to keep restaurants open. We figured out a way to bail out small businesses and flatten the curve for rich people, but we haven't figured out a way to keep schools open. I mean, think about this. The two largest asset classes in America, real estate and the stock market, are at all-time highs. And by the way, 80% of those assets by value are owned by the top 10%. They're at all-time highs, record prosperity, record savings rates. And at the same time, we have food insecurity. 1 in 5 households with kids don't have food insecurity. A third of Americans are worried they can't pay their rent. This is the best of times and the worst of times. We are barreling towards a nation with 3 million lords being served by 350 million serfs. We have decided to protect corporations, not people. Capitalism is literally collapsing on itself unless it rebuilds that pillar of empathy supporting capitalism.
What responsibility do you think the four have? Amazon, Apple, Facebook, and Google, specifically as it goes to the issues you've been talking about and the inequality that we're seeing laid bare. Let's just take Amazon as an example. We just got through Black Friday, it's Cyber Monday. They're absolutely crushing it on sales. They've hired hundreds of thousands, more than 400,000 people since the pandemic began. Most of those people, though, are warehouse workers making $15 an hour. What responsibility do companies, those companies at the very top of the food chain, you think have for not just where we've been, but really where we're going to affect change?
Yeah, so that's a meaningful question. So it struck me today, and I don't think the two are correlated. I just meant to I want to use this as to give your viewers and listeners a sense of proportion. In World War II, we were losing a third of the people that we are losing right now. And if you look at how many people Amazon is hiring every day, they're hiring about 1,400 people a day. That's about how many people each day are dying in America. And I just thought that was just sort of ironic when we talk about this K-shaped recovery. Now, to your question around the responsibility these companies have, we'd like to think that these people have a code and that they bring that code to work and that they recognize the incredible blessings that America brings them and that they want to prevent a tragedy of commons. They want to pay their people well. I applaud Amazon for raising their minimum wage to $15 an hour. There's a lot to like about Amazon, in my view, in terms of what they've done with their employment base. They also have gamified municipalities such that we can transfer wealth from municipal fire, police, and school districts to the shareholders of Amazon through this ridiculous HQ2. They have also put small businesses out of business and prematurely euthanize big businesses by owning the rails and anti-competitive behavior and dumping products at prices through their access to cheap capital no other company can compete with. However, I don't think it's smart. I don't think it's a good strategy to wait on the better angels of billionaires. We can't wait on the generosity and code and personal conduct and character of CEOs. To a certain extent, they're doing their job. It's we as citizens who are not doing ours. Specifically, we're not electing public officials that apply the same scrutiny around antitrust, around anti-competitive behavior, around externalities when teens are getting depressed. We don't seem to want to hold these companies accountable or to the same standards we've held companies in the past. So if there's a culprit here, it's voters who aren't electing leaders that hold these companies to the same standards. If we're just going to wait for the better angels of Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg to show up, that is a bad strategy.
Scott, I'm curious, when you talk about capitalism on the way up, socialism on the way down, when you talk, it's the voters who are bringing this upon ourselves. Doesn't sound like that's going to change. So where are we headed? Sounds like we're going to be headed to the 3 million you talk about, bread and circuses like the old Roman Empire, to keep the 330 million at bay.
Well, I do think there's reasons for optimism. I think the Biden-Harris or the shadow of the Biden-Harris administration has fomented or catalyzed more positive change at Facebook and Twitter than in the last 10 years. I don't think it's an accident that all of a sudden Facebook and Twitter have found the technology and the will to start labeling misinformation around COVID-19 as misinformation. We've seen more of it in the last 8 weeks than we've seen in the last 8 years, and it's because the analogy I would use is you're seniors in high school and you've thrown the mother of all rager parties and you get a text message on Sunday morning that your parents are coming home early and you're trying to clean up the house. There is the mother of all cleaning up their houses going on right now. Janet Yellen's appointment is very encouraging. A more I don't want to call it activists, but more appointees that seem to believe in bilateral, multilateral cooperation, who seem to believe the regulation plays an important role that will likely fund the CDC to the extent it warrants. $700 billion to the military, $7 billion to CDC. We're losing people at 3 times the velocity of World War II. It just seems like our priorities are a bit messed up here. And we have big tech, which is basically, in my view, overrun Washington. So I am hopeful. There's some real silver linings here, but it's up to us to embrace those and demand more of our leaders and demand accountability and realize that these companies are not people. We should not be protecting them. They're not concerned with the condition of our soul. They're not going to take care of us when we get older. That without structural change at a regulatory level, without a national complexion of sacrifice, patriotism used to mean sacrifice. Now it means stimulus. We planted victory gardens. We reached into our pockets. We didn't have our hand out. The notion that we would find wearing a mask to Walmart somehow tyrannical. My mother In 1941, Britain slept in a makeshift bomb shelter and they passed out gas masks in the shape of Disney characters so the kids would put them on. And the idea that someone would say that this imposed on their individual freedom is just unthinkable. So we have a lot of soul searching to do here, but there's nothing wrong with America that can't be fixed with what's right with America. And I'm hopeful that a lot of those changes start in January.
Scott, I've got to start wrapping up with you, but when you talk about your mother, I was thinking of my grandmother Hazel, who drove a truck, volunteer during World War II in Portland, Maine, and the people of Portland are still terrified and stay off the roads. But I have to ask you, as I write up this discussion, we invite you into the program because you're someone people do listen to. What's the key message then? Because looking at the book, and many of the things you say sound very pessimistic, and yet you say there's reason for hope. So what's my headline? What's the key message?
Capitalism fails unless it rests on a foundation of empathy and love. We have full body contact violence at the corporate level. We let businesses go out of business. We let people get fired such that Apple can emerge and put Sun Microsystems out of business. And then we take that incredible prosperity and we're more empathetic with people. We fund Social Security so we can take 38% of seniors who are in poverty down to 11%. We fund Head Start. We have flipped the script and we've decided that capitalism means being loving and empathetic to corporations and Darwinistic and harsh towards individuals. Unless we flip it back and start deciding that capitalism is in the agency of others and start letting corporations go out of business and being harsh on corporations and being more empathetic and generous with our citizens, capitalism, the greatest system of its kind, the greatest upward lubricant of the middle class in history, will collapse on itself. America isn't what it is. America is what we make of it. It is up to us, but it is time to go back to a system of America where capitalism rests on a pool of empathy.
Scott Galloway, talking about industries maybe going under. We didn't even get to talk about higher education, which you're in, so we'll have to dive into that another time. It's a great read. The book is Post-Corona: From Crisis to Opportunity. Scott Galloway, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.